Good day to all the participants in the 6th International Conference of the International Organization for Health, Sports, and Kinesiology. We are here to present to you our research, which is entitled Sports Participation and the Coping Strategies of Selected Out-of-School Youth in Selected Cities in Metro Manila. The members of the research group are John Michael Castro, Leandro Jamin Erasga, Angel Ong, and Michael David Tan Lopez, RPM, MS-HMS. We are all from the University of Santo Tomas Institute of Physical Education and Athletics in Manila, the Philippines.
Sports has long been regarded to have a favorable impact on the development of young people. This concept can even be traced back to Plato, who considered sports as an essential aspect of education in terms of character development. Spruitt et al., 2017. Participating in extracurricular activities, whether sports or intellectual clubs, can assist young adults to avoid delinquent acts. Although there was considerable difference among schools, the more engaged in sports and groups an individual was, the lower their chances of delinquency. Spruitt et al., 2016. This demonstrates how sports can be a powerful tool in transforming one's life into one that has a positive impact on society. Sports participation also teaches different coping mechanisms that can be used in competitive and non-competitive situations. Nicholas et al., 2011. Individuals who focus on task-oriented coping strategies often achieve positive outcomes, while those who utilize disengagement or distraction coping strategies usually experience negative outcomes. Laborde et al., 2012. For this research, we use as our framework Hans Selye's General Adaptation Syndrome, or GAS theory. It entails a three-stage process that illustrates the physical variations that the body goes through when under stress, namely alarm, resistance, and exhaustion. Buckner et al., 2017. When individuals face stressful situations, one way by which they may avoid this is by participating in sports. Their involvement in this type of activity may further assist them in developing more positive coping strategies that can enable them to face the different stresses that may come along the way.
The purpose of this study is to investigate the influence of sports participation, its frequency and structure on the coping strategies of selected out-of-school youth in selected cities in Metro Manila. This study aims to answer the following questions. Number 1, what is the participant's profile on sports participation in terms of letter A, frequency, days per week, letter B, organization, structured or unstructured. Number 2, what is the coping strategy being used by the participants? And number 3, is there a significant relationship between the participant's profile on sport participation and coping strategies? The study has several hypotheses that look at the relationship between the sport participation profiles of the participants and their coping strategies. The hypothesis considered both positive and negative correlation of each coping strategy, since each of them corresponds to a positive and negative approach on the issues. The hypotheses are as follows. Hypothesis 1. There is a positive correlation between frequency of sport participation and task-oriented coping. Hypothesis 2. There is a negative correlation between frequency of sport participation and distraction-oriented coping. Hypothesis 3. There is a negative correlation between frequency of sport participation and disengagement-oriented coping. Hypothesis 4. There is a positive correlation between sport organization and task-oriented coping. Hypothesis 5. There is a negative correlation between sports organization and distraction-oriented coping. And hypothesis 6. There is a negative correlation between sports organization and disengagement-oriented coping.
This undertaking used quantitative methodology. It is an approach that aims to measure the compilation and evaluation of responses using numerical data to illustrate characteristics, find correlations, and test hypotheses. Gao, Pu, Pam, and Polio 2022. This study used questionnaires in gathering data from our respondents. It then followed by a descriptive coronational design to describe the relationship among variables. Glass and Hopkins, 1984, describe descriptive research as a research design involving data gathering that shows occasions and then arranges, organizes, outlines, and describes the data collection. A correlational study, on the other hand, assesses the relationship between two variables. It can be binary or continuous without the researchers being in control. Purposive sampling technique was employed to gather respondents for this study. The respondents of this study were 66 out-of-school youth. Males and females aged 50 to 24 were eligible to participate, as this is the age range set by the World Health Organization to categorize the youth. They were all residing in the selected cities in Metro Manila and were not engaged in any formal and non-formal education during the time of the data gathering. The data gathering was conducted via online Google Forms because the researchers were not fully able to physically interact with the respondents due to the pandemic-related restrictions. The respondents were asked to initially answer an informed consent form that signified their willingness to participate in the study. With their consent, they were then asked to answer a demographic information sheet which included information such as their place of residence in Metro Manila, the age at the time of data gathering, the frequency of their participation in sports in terms of number of days in a week, and whether their engagement in sports is via structured or unstructured means. After that, they answered the dispositional coping inventory for competitive sports, DCICS, Hertz-Thomson, Wiesek, Fisher, and Gaudreau 2011. It consists of 39 items, with each item on a 5-point Likert scale ranging from 1 does not correspond to all to 5 corresponds very strongly. It was designed to assess 10 coping strategies that are classified in 3 coping dimensions. A. Task-oriented coping. B. Distraction-oriented coping. And C. Disengagement-oriented coping. The scale showed adequate levels of convergent, concurrent, and differential validity, as well as acceptable internal consistency.
We now proceed to the presentation and analysis of the results of the study. We'll be discussing it based on the research questions that were enumerated earlier. For research question 1, what is the participant's profile of sports participation in terms of frequency, days per week, and organization, structured or unstructured? Table 1 shows the participants' frequency and organization of sports participation. The mean frequency of sports participation is 2.79 days. Based on the results gathered, a large number of participants participated in at least 1 to 3 days of sports, which can be attributed to sports, whether structured or unstructured, being more available now due to the government loosening the COVID-19 related restrictions. The organization of sports participation results showed that unstructured sports activity has a higher total with 52, 78.8%, in contrast to structured with 14, 21.2%, and a mean of 1.78. Structured sports include official rules along with officials and coaches to supervise the games, while unstructured sport activities have informal rules with the absence of coaches and officials. Although structured sports have fair regulations and coaching, it usually costs money to participate in it, unlike unstructured sports, which are free to play. This may be the reason why the majority of the participants participate in unstructured sports, since they are out of school. They might not have the financial means to register in structured sports events. Another reason is that a lot of sports events are school-based, just like intramurals and intercollegiate leagues. For research question 2, what is the coping strategy used by the participants? Table 2 presents the coping strategies used by the participants when playing sports. It shows that task-oriented coping strategy registered the highest mean of 3.55, with verbal interpretation corresponds strongly. With the task-oriented coping strategy being the most frequently used, it shows that the participants are more likely to focus themselves on the task at hand or goal management through confrontation of the source of stress when playing sports. This entails getting information regarding stressful conditions and maximizing usage of available resources to handle the situation. For research question 3, is there a significant relationship between the participants' profile on sports participation and coping strategies? Table 3 shows the relationship between the sports participation profile and coping strategies used by the participants. In terms of the relationship between the variables, only task-oriented coping showed a significant positive relationship with the frequency of sports participation. On the other hand, only disengagement-oriented coping had a significant negative relationship with the organization of sports participation, the p-value of negative 0.14. Sports participation can provide individuals with opportunities to develop and practice effective coping strategies. Creswell and Hodge 2001 stated that when athletes are confronted with uncontrollable environmental stressors, they reported that they had coped with most effectively when they focus on the elements of the task that they could control. A study conducted by Lancheva et al. 2020 looked at how 199 student athletes managed to cope with stressful situations. Active planning, cognitive restructuring, and emotional calming were dominant coping strategies that surfaced in their study.
We have several recommendations from this study. First, out-of-school youth should explore more opportunities for participation in sports because this can be beneficial for their growth and development. More frequent sports participations in structured sports activities can teach them to manage challenges and second, government agencies should organize and promote more sports programs in their localities that can cater especially to vulnerable populations. And third, future researchers can consider other participant groups such as street children, working students, and prisoners and use other instruments locally made if possible as well. That's all for our presentation. Thank you very much for listening. Have a wonderful day ahead.